You are now tuning into the Resilient Podcast. Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 11 of the Resilient Podcast. I am your host, Rob Aurelius, and I know it's been about a week and a half since, it's been a little bit more than a week and a half because I know that in the beginning of September, there was an episode, which was episode 10, but episode 11, I decided to take about a week and some change to just, gather some things together. I've been really busy with work. Um, you know, Business with ARCG has been good. As I mentioned to everyone in the past, I am also a brand ambassador for Dolce & Gabbana Beauty. So there's been a few fragrances that came out in the last few months, and I've just, been promoting them. So that's also been taking my time as well too. But for those, because I had some people reach out to me over the last few weeks and said, hey, we haven't heard a podcast episode from you since the beginning of the month. And I said, yes, I know. But as promised, I will always have 2 episodes of the Resilient Podcast every month. That's just how it's going to be. Maybe sometimes 3, maybe sometimes 4. I don't think we're going to go that far with 4, but you might get 3 episodes in 1 month, but you will always get 2 episodes in 1 month. So like I mentioned before, this is episode number 11 of the Resilient Podcast. And today we're going to talk about owning your part, the power of accountability in healing. And, folks, this month started off pretty interesting. It was about 2 weeks into my relationship with my ex-girlfriend, APA, and I was happy. I had been single for 2 years and a half. I was, in October of 2023, it made 3 years since my previous ex-girlfriend and I broke up. And, I was single for about 2.5 years. And for 2.5 years, I put in the work to heal, to take accountability for what I did, because I have to be honest and I have to come clean. The relationship that I was in from 2018 to late 2020, it was pretty toxic, and I played a major role in that. I, was not a good boyfriend to my ex. I was not fair in so many ways, but I do have to say that it was one of those situations where we met, we got together, and very quickly we got into a relationship, pretty much like, what happened with my last relationship with APA, where, we started dating, a few days after we met in person. Of course, we had been chatting, we had been having conversations on the phone and whatnot before I met her in person. But the same month that I met her was the same month that I asked her to be my girlfriend. And, in the relationship previous to that one, It was kind of the same situation. I knew my ex for a while. We had been talking for months, and we finally met. And we lived in the same neighborhood, and I don't know why it took so long for us to meet, but you know, we finally met. We got together, and I will be honest. The very beginning of the relationship, there was just a lot of lust, and I did like my ex. I did start to fall for my ex shortly after that. And relationship was up and down. There was a lot that happened. There was a lot that went on, and it took me a long time to realize the role that I played in that relationship. And then ultimately, from that relationship, I was able to realize what taking accountability actually was. The fact of the matter is, folks, a lot of people do not know what accountability is. Even as adults, you talk to people about accountability and they're like, what is that? And the truth of the matter is, a lot of people just don't understand what it is. They don't know what it is. They like, what's taking accountability? And, it's very simple. You said something that offended me, and I bring it up to your attention and say, hey, um, I don't like what you said to me the other day because that actually offended me because it's something that I shared with you in confidence. And then you brought it up and kind of like made a joke out of it. And the person that you're saying this to has either the option of saying, oh my God, I'm so sorry, Rob. I didn't know that I offended you. Please, 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 please accept my apology. I take accountability and I will never do that ever again. Or the person could just be like, oh, well, it was just a joke. It wasn't that serious. Please don't be sensitive. That's not taking accountability. And, I want to thank, everything happens for a reason, right? And every relationship that we have in life, whether it's platonic, whether it's a friendship relationship, whether it's, relationship with your family, friends, lovers, everything, business partners, co-workers, colleagues, people from school, right? Schoolmates. Um, every relationship that we encounter in this life is for a reason, and it teaches us something. It's supposed to teach us something. And that relationship that lasted about 3 years, 2 years and a half, to be exact, that relationship taught me what it was to be held accountable for things, how to take accountability, when to take accountability. And that's why when I had this relationship that I was recently in, whenever my ex would say something to me like, oh, well, the other day you said something that was hurtful, or I felt like you wasn't giving me the space to vent to you, or whatever the case may be, I would apologize to him and be like, listen, I'm so sorry that I made you feel that way. And taking accountability and not being dismissive. Perfect example of taking accountability. And I've said this before. We need to stop saying to people when, we do something to them, I'm sorry that you feel that way. We need to start saying more of, I'm sorry that I made you feel that way. Don't ever say to people, I'm sorry if something I said to you hurt you. And, change it to and say, I'm sorry that the things that I said to you, something there hurt your feelings, and I apologize for that. And accountability is very serious, and not everyone is willing to learn how to take accountability, and that's fine. And for those people out there that do care about taking accountability, especially taking accountability during healing, like when you break up and time is going by and you're like, why did we break up? What did I do wrong? What did I say wrong to them? If we take if we realize the importance of taking accountability during healing, um it's going to make us realize a lot. And it's been officially 7 months since my ex-girlfriend and I broke up. it's been 6 months since I last heard from her. And, last month we were supposed to make a year together. And, 6 months of not being able to speak to her, not know a single thing about her, if she's alive, if she's well. I pray that she's well. I believe that she's well. I believe that she's doing good. I believe that she's doing everything that she needs to do to make herself feel good. And, the way she goes about it is, if she feels that she doesn't have to reach out, if she feels that, for example, if I'm dead to her right now, it's just her way of healing, and it's just her way of getting through what she needs to get through. This was a very tough relationship for 6 months. This was a very tough personality person that I dealt with. I spoke about, you know, the anxiety that I had in the relationship with her, where I would sometimes have conversations with her about her previous relationships and listen to her. Most of these conversations were in the car, because there was a lot of driving in that relationship. We were always driving somewhere. And I remember having that anxiety, saying to myself, man, this is how she feels about the people that she dated in the past. I can never be on the other side with those people. I have to always do everything in my power to remain her boyfriend and never have to go through that. But the sad thing is that even during the relationship, she treated me at times like a stranger. She treated me at times like an enemy. Like I was in her life to bug her, if like I was in her life to annoy her, like I was in her life to um be in the way. And what breaks my heart about this breakup is that she never fully got the chance. I don't know if she ever asked herself, like, what's his purpose in my life? Like, why is he here? And if she did, she probably thought, like, well, I don't know what he's here for, but he's probably a distraction. But she never fully took the time, and I know this for a fact. She never fully took the time to appreciate my presence and appreciate what I had to offer her. When we broke up, she said something that was gut punching. And she said, when you spend time away from people, it makes you realize if you miss them or not. And it makes you realize, what is this person adding to my life? What is this person subtracting from my life? And she proceeded to say, and this was back in January, when she said, when I think about if you're adding or subtracting, I don't see what you're adding. And that's where I realized that ultimately she just didn't appreciate anything that I did for her. Like celebrating her birthday, celebrating her favorite holiday, which is Halloween, always wanting to be there for her whenever she had a lot of days that she was upset. Most of the time she was upset. Most of the time she was angry. You know, I, if she went a day driving on the road without cursing somebody out or getting frustrated, it was a big thing. It was a big accomplishment. And I said to myself, I did so much for her in the little bit of time that we were together. I went out my way for her in so many instances. I literally put her mental health, her feelings before mine. And that ended up ultimately destroying me. Because when we weren't together anymore, and I started to realize majority of the things that she did, I was like, wow. I came into her life to bring joy, happiness, and show her different. And she came into my life to wreck it. And she left without saying goodbye properly. She left without apologizing for what she put me through. She left with no care in the world. And it left me so confused and so angry. And when I spoke to my therapist one day, I said, look, we acknowledge what she did. We acknowledge what she said. But I need to start acknowledging the role that I played in the situation and how I allowed this to happen. So I want to talk about the importance of taking responsibility during the healing process and conveys of empowering nature of accountability. So the importance of taking accountability during healing, one has to recognize the role of accountability in the healing process after a breakup. And, I recently shared, a few things with you all, and I want to share a personal reflection on how taking accountability has impacted my own healing journey. And one thing I've noticed is through reflecting, she didn't leave me with much, right? When we had the breakup conversation back in March, a lot of it was just like what I was doing wrong, what I said wrong during the relationship. And not once in that conversation did she say, this is what I did wrong. This, like I said, she didn't apologize for anything. She didn't say thank you for what you did for me while we were together. I'm sorry that it didn't work out. It was just a lot of like, Rob, you need to get your life together. And until you get your life together, you're going to keep going through all these things. And the only thing that she said positive to me in that entire conversation was, you don't give yourself enough credit. And after that, like everything else is just like, everything was my fault. And I feel that she didn't take accountability for anything in that breakup conversation. Let's define accountability in the context of healing. So my therapist asked me, what does taking accountability mean in the context of a breakup? And I remember saying to her, well, taking accountability means recognizing and owning your role in the relationship and its eventual end. It involves reflecting on your actions, decisions, and behaviors without placing all the blame on your partner. It's about acknowledging what you could have done differently, which is essential for personal growth and healing. So it goes back to my reflection. Reflecting made me realize, okay, I can't blame everything on her, because even though she was the way she was towards me, that was her. That was who she was as a person. But what about me? The relationship was two people. The relationship wasn't just one person. So what was I doing? And what was it that I was saying to her that ultimately made her feel like I wasn't adding value to the relationship? So, I just kept doing more reflecting. And my therapist asked me in another session, I believe it was. I don't know I can't remember if it was in the same session, but I remember asking me, why is it important to take accountability during the healing process? And I was like, oh, wow. And I was like, listen, accountability is crucial because it helps you understand your own patterns and behaviors, which can prevent the same issues from arising in the future relationships. And I said it shifts the focus from blaming others to self-reflection, which is a key step in emotional growth and healing. So when my ex and I broke up, I remember her saying to me, like, um, if you don't love yourself, you're going to go through a lot of hurt and a lot of pain. People are going to hurt you so much because you don't love yourself. Because if you do love yourself, you're going to be able to make sure that people cannot hurt you as much as you get hurt. And that's where I said to myself, ultimately, well, maybe she's right. Maybe I don't love myself at all, or maybe I don't love myself enough that I allow people to step all over me. And, you know, the truth of the matter is there's benefits of taking accountability. Sometimes people are scared to take accountability, but I'll tell you what, because, you ask yourself, well, okay, there's benefits to taking accountability. How can taking accountability aid in the healing process? And to me, taking accountability could lead to three things. One, personal growth. Personal growth by recognizing your role in the relationship. You can learn from your mistakes and avoid repeating them. That's very important. You don't want to keep repeating the same mistakes over and over and over. Number two, empowerment. Owning your actions gives you control over your narrative by helping you feel more empowered and less like a victim. And I've been there before, where I felt like the victim a lot until I started, owning up to my actions. And then lastly, one of my favorite words, closure. Understanding my contribution to the breakup can bring clarity and closure, making it easier to move on. So, this month I went out to, and it was actually before 9/11. Yeah. So September 10th, I went out to Staten Island to see James. James is my spiritual advisor, and we were talking about the Resilience Project. And we went over so many things. And James had asked me, what are some challenges people face when trying to take accountability? And how can they overcome them? And I said, James, challenges include defensiveness, fear of judgment, and difficulty in admitting fault. And he was like, wow. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, look, overcoming these challenges involves practicing self-compassion, being honest with yourself, and focusing on the long-term benefits of accountability. It's also helpful to seek guidance from, trusted friends or a therapist who can provide an objective perspective. And, he was like, that's amazing. And I was like, yeah, it's the truth. So let's talk about steps to take accountability. And you might ask yourself, what are practical steps that one can take to start being accountable in their healing journey? And these steps are very, very, very important. Step number one, self-reflection. Something I've been doing all year since this breakup took place. Spend time reflecting on the relationship and your role in it. Journaling can be a helpful tool for this. Number two, admitting to mistakes. Acknowledging where you have may gone wrong without excusing or minimizing your actions. Number three, apologizing. If appropriate, offer sincere apology to your ex, to yourself, and for any harm caused. And lastly, number four, making changes. Identify specific areas for personal improvement and commit to making those changes in future relationships. I think it was the end of August, or it could have been the beginning of September, but I had listened to a voice recording that I don't necessarily know why I recorded it at the time, but this is a voice recording from sometime last year in the beginning, very beginning of November. Like Halloween had been, because Halloween's the last day of October, right? So we were about I want to say 2 weeks before her birthday. Her birthday's on November 19th. And we had a phone conversation. And in this phone conversation, I was listening to how I was presenting to her like the things that I was upset about. And she was also presenting the things that she was upset about. And, I sat there and I listened to the whole conversation. And boy, was I disgusted. But here's the thing, I wasn't disgusted with her. I was disgusted with myself. Because as entitled as I felt, as, right as I felt at the time, like valid, I felt valid for feeling the way that I was feeling, because ultimately what I was saying to her was, we started dating in August, but now it's November, and I'm explaining to her, like, look, like, you get mad very easily. You curse a lot. You get very upset. You say things when you're angry that just, I don't, it doesn't make me feel good. And, because I was so passionate of just proving my case to her, like, this is why I am upset at you. I remember hearing her saying things like, do you ever think about this? Do you ever think about how this makes me feel? And, I was so dismissive to her in that conversation. And when her questions came up in that conversation, of course, at that time, my answers were my answers. And I remember catching myself beginning to speak as I heard that question that she asked me. And then as soon as I begin to speak, I hear my voice from the audio and I pause. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that to her, even though I was upset. And I realized how dismissive I was, how annoyed I was. And I said to myself, man, it was okay for me to tell her, look, these are things you're doing that upset me. But what was not okay was to make her feel like she was a villain for it and make her feel like she was a terrible person for it. And the responses that I had today, like, now compared to the responses back then, I was like, I can't believe it. I can't believe that this is what I said to her. I can't believe that this is how I responded to her. And I shared this with my therapist, and I said to my therapist, I can't believe that in a time where I could have been teachable, in a time that I could have just expressed to her, like, hey, babe, even though you did this and this made me feel uncomfortable, I'm only bringing this up to your attention because I love you and I care about you, and it bothers me. And, and don't get me wrong, I did say this to her a few times, but I wish I would have said it at that very moment. And, I could have said something along the lines like, but, can I just share some things with you to help you understand what happened here and why I'm upset and how we can work on, work on this, like, to find a solution and to help you, like, not do this again, because in a relationship, you have to be supportive to your partner. You just have to. Even if your partner did something that upsets you, you have to explain it to them in a way where they don't feel like I'm a terrible person. It's two humans speaking to each other. One person's speaking, one person's listening. And, reflecting is what made me realize that I was such an a-hole during that time. And regardless of the fact, if a few people would be like, well, you was upset and how you felt was valid, and all you did was express how you felt. And, I would say, like, look, yes, but at the same time, I just wish that I was nicer to her. And I'm taking accountability on that right now. I wish I took accountability then, but I take accountability for it now, and I sincerely apologize to her. I apologize to myself. Like I just said, we got to apologize to ourselves, because I remember there was a time that she said to me, sometimes I just need you to be my boyfriend. And now that makes so much sense. Because when I thought I was being her boyfriend, there was key moments that I should have been her boyfriend, and I was just somebody complaining to her about something she did wrong. And, this is why I said, making those changes to identify specific areas for personal improvement and to commit making those changes in future relationships, it's spot on. So let's talk about self-compassion. How can someone balance accountability with self-compassion during this process? And, balancing accountability with self-compassion involves recognizing that making mistakes is part of being human. It's important to hold yourself accountable without resorting to self-criticism. Focus on learning and growing from the experience rather than dwelling on guilt or shame. Okay, so let's talk about personal reflections and experiences. I want to share a personal story where taking accountability played a significant role in the healing process. And, I just shared with you guys like that one part where, I have this phone conversation with her. I recorded it and I listened to it and I said to myself, wow, I can't believe that I spoke to her the way that I did, regardless of how I felt, regardless how valid I felt about that situation. I just wish that I was just more understanding. And, it's kind of like when a parent like scolds a child and says, you did this wrong, and the child apologizes, and you just continue to nag them about the situation. How do you expect them to really, really, really learn? They're gonna end up going back to the room and just being sad. Like, I made my mom and dad angry. But, saying something to them like, even though you did something wrong and you upset me and you apologized, I appreciate your apology, but we need to work on you not doing that ever again. Sometimes we have to be the person to teach someone that taking responsibility for your actions eventually helps you. And, I've been learning a lot about accountability since I started learning what accountability was. And sometimes the things that I do and the things that I say, I ultimately start thinking to myself, how much have I changed since I started taking accountability? Have I changed at all, since I started taking accountability? And I think the way you view things, your perspectives change once you start taking accountability. So in my case, how has taking accountability changed the way that I view myself and my past relationships now that I know what it feels like to take accountability? And, my response to that is reflecting on how taking accountability has led to a deeper understanding of myself and my needs and my boundaries, and how it's possibly, how it has positively impacted my approach to a new relationship. It's like I said, my past relationship before the recent one, I was able to be a little bit more understanding. Yeah, there was a heat of a moment where I got mad at her and I explained to her, look, you did this, you did that, and I don't like it. But when she shared with me like how she felt on her end. It allowed me to take time to process it. Something I wouldn't do before. I wouldn't process things. I would just, you know, say what I needed to say and that was it. But now I really, 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 really understand more how to be patient with things. Folks, I do apologize in advance if anything I said in this episode may have been a little bit confusing. Um, please understand that this particular episode was a little difficult for me to even produce because one, um, September, I thought about specific things that happened this month, and I mentioned it in the beginning. We had spent um, Labor Day together, and it was our first staycation, and it was actually in Jersey. And she came to Brooklyn after that. Actually, I think she came to Brooklyn first, and then we spent Labor Day weekend together. And, there's this specific place that I took her to. She wanted to go to this place called 8-Bit in Brooklyn where they sell like, fried chicken and these burgers that look so delicious on social media, and you can play video games there. And that's her world. That's what she likes. And, anything to please her, right? So there was something that would happen to me when I would leave my office. Because I think it was like on a Saturday morning or something. When she came to Brooklyn, she came and she parked in front of my office. And man, the amount of times that scene replayed in my head, like sometimes I would just walk out of my office, whether I was going home or I was going somewhere else, and I would look at the corner where her, that part of the street where her car was parked, and it just kept replaying in my head over and over and over. And it finally became a year since that. And I remember saying to myself, like, okay, am I going to still keep thinking about this every time I go outside? Am I always going to remember her car being parked outside? Because, it's difficult, right? Like, a part of me wants to move on. I mean, I have no choice. I have to move on. I can still share this story. I can still talk about this. I probably will be talking about this for the rest of my life, but like a part of me still has to move on. A part of me has to accept the fact that her and I are never going to speak again. Her and I are never going to cross paths again. I don't think she wants that. I think the way she moves on is I don't need to speak to somebody ever again. Whether we're enemies or not, I just don't look that way anymore. The past is the past. And she's one of those people. She's definitely one of those people. She's one of those people that to her, the past is the past and you don't go back. So also, yesterday was the Global Citizen Festival in New York City. And I had applied for media credentials because this would have been the 5th year in a row that ARCG Media covers the Global Citizen Festival. But this year they couldn't accommodate us. They were very limited for some reason. Not going to get into it. It's a conversation for another day, I guess. And I was like, man, like I was going to be at this Global Citizen Festival this year, just in my feelings, thinking about how last year's Global Citizen, it rained the whole entire day, but I was miserable for the most part. But at the same time, I was happy for her because she got to see 2 of her favorite K-pop groups, the Stray Kids and Jungkook from BTS. And this again, this is her world. And we had just been together for like 3 weeks at that point. And, like at the end of August, when I started telling her, like, hey, like, Global Citizen Festival's next month, and these are some of the guests, these are some of the people that are going to be performing, she was excited. And I didn't know how excited she was until, I saw her out there, like, enjoying the music and everything. And I was like, man, I'm glad that I was able to do this for her. I'm glad that I was able to, like, this happened at the right time. Like, this year's Global Citizen Festival lineup was it was great because everything happened right on time. And September 23rd, I believe. Yes, September 23rd last year was when Global Citizen Festival took place. And that day came up. And there's a picture of us that's on social media, on my social media, where we're both in the rain. And it was a selfie that I took with her. And she was so happy. And I looked miserable in that selfie because I was wet with a poncho. And she had her poncho on too. But she was so happy. She was doing like a duck face, and she had her fingers, in the peace sign, while I was just there, like, upset that it was pouring. And now it's a photo that's just part of a memory. And all I can say to myself is, I took too many of those moments for granted. And I wish I could go back and change it. So I think everything happens for a reason. This year, I didn't get a chance to go. Yesterday was Global Citizen Festival in New York City, and I wasn't there. I didn't even go as a fan, a spectator, any of that. I just ended up working. I went to New Jersey to do an event for Dolce and Gabbana. So, you know, I don't know, man. A lot of this stuff is hard to process. And again, I apologize in advance if this episode in particular, and maybe the episodes to come, or some of the previous episodes, you can't really understand where I'm coming from. I promise you that over time I will get better at this. And I just have to be transparent. I just have to be honest. Um, Sometimes doing these podcast episodes are not easy for me. And this one right here personally was not easy for me at all. So, I want to conclude this episode, and I just want to say that the importance of taking accountability and the benefits it brings to the healing process and the steps to do so are very important. And I want to, just let you all know that accountability is a powerful tool for personal growth, and that it's an essential part of moving forward after a breakup. So, folks, a little call into action here. I want to encourage all of my listeners to reflect on their own experiences and consider where they might need to take accountability in their own healing journey. So I want to invite you to, share your thoughts or stories on social media by following us on The Resilient Pod on Instagram and Twitter. I want to hear your stories. And, you know, taking accountability, whether you believe it or not, will help you realize so much, just like it's allowed me to realize so much. So, our next episode, which will be next month in October, will feature a special guest. I can't give away his name. You know how, like, some podcasts announce people in advance? I'm not ready to do that yet. So, I will have technically my third guest on episode 12. And this is a special guest. This is someone that I recently got the chance to speak to. And this person shared a story with me, and I was like, wow, my story is nothing compared to theirs. But I'm fortunate that this person is going to be on the podcast, and I look forward to it. And it's going to be from Atlanta, Georgia. because next weekend I am going away to Atlanta for a WWE premium live event called Bad Blood. And we're going to be shooting some content and scenes out there for the Resilient Project. And I'm going to be doing the podcast. So I look forward to that. I look forward to my trip to Atlanta. And when I come back, I will have so much to share with you all about that trip. But I want to wrap up this episode, and I want to say that again, I want to thank everyone from the bottom of my heart, those that tune in, those that are listening, those that are subscribing. I appreciate you very much. This podcast was created to be a beacon of hope for everyone that's out there struggling, and everyone out there that doesn't know what resilient is and wants to know what it is. So the more as time goes by, the more resilient we shall all become. So today, my message to the world is give yourself time with everything. Give yourself time to think about things. Don't just act on impulse. Sometimes acting on impulse is not going to get you anywhere. It's actually going to make you sit there and regret eventually why you acted on impulse. Give yourself time. Be patient with yourself. You deserve to give yourself that patience and that grace. I promise you, in the long run, it's going to benefit you a lot. And you're going to remember these words from me. And you're going to thank yourself eventually for taking time. So right now, folks, all we can do is take time. You know how they say there's not enough time? Time is a precious commodity and it just goes like that. That's true. But be wise with your time. Because if you're wise with your time, time will be good to you. So I look forward to episode 12. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate everyone. And like I always say, one life to live, live it well. Love one another, love yourself. And folks, there's too much going on in the world right now. And you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Let's make the difference that we want to see. Always. But for now, this is Rob Aurelius, the Resilient Podcast, saying goodbye, and I will see you all episode 12 from Atlanta, Georgia. Take care and peace.